The Pareto Principle states that for many outcomes, roughly 80% of consequences come from 20% of causes. Other names for this principle are the 80-20 rule, the law of the vital few, or the principle of factor sparsity. Management consultant Joseph Juran developed the concept in the context of quality control and improvement, naming it after the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto, who noted the 80-20 connection while at the University of Lausanne in 1896. His first work showed that approximately 80% of the land in Italy was actually owned by 20% of the population. The Pareto principle is only slightly related to the Pareto efficiency. Mathematically, the 80-20 rule is roughly described by a power law distribution for a particular set of parameters, and many natural phenomena have been shown to exhibit such distribution. It is an adage of business management that 80% of the sales in the business will actually come from about 20% of the customers. The Pareto principle states that for many outcomes, roughly 80% of the consequences come from 20% of the causes, or the vital few. Pareto's observation was in connection with the population and wealth. Pareto noted that approximately 80% of Italy's land was actually owned by about 20% of the population. He then carried out surveys on a variety of other countries and found to his surprise that a similar distribution applied in many countries. In fact, in businesses, many examples of the 80-20 principle have been validated. 20% of the products usually account for about 80% of the dollar sales value. So do 20% of the customers. 20% of the products or customers usually also account for about 80% of the organization's profits. An important property of the Pareto distribution is that they have a fat tail. In the real world, this means that the wealthiest 1% of the population possesses a substantially larger portion of the national income and wealth than would be predicted by extrapolating the distribution of middle income earners. We generally use the Pareto principle in Six Sigma when we need to narrow down a larger list of potential root causes. By utilizing the 80-20 rule, we can determine the top causes that result in at least 80% of the problems within our process. Once we are able to narrow down the list of potential root causes, we can then use other tools to further define how closely related those causes are to the actual problem, and in what order these most crucial root causes are dealt with as a part of a Six Sigma project. Unlike run charts and even the standard bar graph, one of the first things that we need to do in creating a Pareto chart is to organize the data labels into an order from greatest to least. That is, we need to know how many for each of the separate labels, then place them in an order with the first cause being the one with the highest number of related incidents. And to do this, we need to calculate the totals for each of the potential causes that will be included in the chart. In Six Sigma, having accurate and up-to-date data is crucial to the success of an initiative. But when we are just starting out, ensuring that we have good data sources can be difficult. In order to determine the order of the potential causes that will be included in the chart, we need to determine how many for each. We generally want a good amount of clear data that is neither biased nor too outdated. We will then need to count the total for each and then organize the data in order from greatest to least. Another important aspect of the Pareto chart is the trend line. Well, it's actually a cumulative line which starts at the value of the first, the highest, value on the left and climbs to 100% on the right, based on the total cumulative percentages of each potential cause. As the basis of the Pareto chart starts with the tallest on the left and curves downward to the smallest on the right, the cumulative line will start with the percentage of the tallest on the left to the total of all data points and will curve upwards to the top right where it will hit 100% above the shortest bar in the chart. The axis of the Pareto chart is the same as any other column chart. It must be pointed out that what we generally refer to as a bar chart actually refers to the chart where the bars are horizontal. And in charts where the bars are vertical, these are known as column charts. However, the terms are commonly interchanged with one another. With the Pareto chart, the lowest points on the horizontal axis represents the 0 point, whereas the highest point represents both the greatest value of the most common cause as well as 100% of the cumulative quantities of all of the data points. The far left axis represents both the highest valued data point as well as the starting point of the cumulative total, and the far right represents the lowest valued data point as well as the 100% cumulative total of all of the data points. While bar charts can have large differences in size and shape, when it comes to the Pareto chart, we only have one shape. Depending on the amount of potential root causes and the total number of data points for each and cumulative, the chart should have a slope with the highest point on the upper left and the lowest point on the bottom right, and can appear almost exponential. The cumulative percentage bar that runs from the left to the right along the top should closely replicate the obverse of the shape of the bar as it curves to the upper right. The Pareto Principle states that for many outcomes, roughly 80% of the consequences come from roughly 20% of the causes. This is also known as the vital few. Pareto's observation was in connection with the population and wealth. He noticed that approximately 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the population. And in carrying out surveys in other countries, he found also that a similar distribution applied. In business today, many examples of the 80-20 principle have been validated. 20% of the products usually account for about 80% of the dollar sales value. So do 20% of customers. 20% of products or customers usually also account for about 80% of an organization's profits. An important property of the Pareto distribution is that they only have a fat tail. In the real world, this means that the wealthiest 1% population possesses a substantially larger portion of the national income and wealth than would be capable of being predicted through the extrapolation of data of middle income earners. One of the biggest benefits of using the Pareto chart is how easy it is to analyze the results. Since the principle states that 20% of the root causes will lead to 80% of the defects, you should be able to clearly see the first one or two potential causes on the far left of the chart, and these will contain the largest portion of the cumulative total, with the percentage line straightening out the closer it gets to the 100% mark. Every week, we upload new videos between 5 and 10 minutes in length, where we will focus on the strategic implementation of Lean and Six Sigma. As a Six Sigma expert, I am passionate about quality. And if you are too, then click subscribe to be notified whenever we upload our next Lean Six Sigma video.